What's up, AP Psychers? Welcome to your brain lecture, arguably the most important lecture in this whole unit, and it is full of really important content. It is also fascinating, so I bet you I'll pique some of your interest here. If you don't understand everything through this lecture, don't worry, a lot of these ideas will repeat throughout this unit and the entire course. So by the time the course is over, you will be a master of the brain. You'll see some spots in your notes for mnemonic devices. Don't worry, we'll talk about those in class. I'm also going to try to stick to just definitions and the basic facts in this unit, in this lecture. So not a ton of examples and stories in this one because I just want to get through it or this lecture will go on forever. All right, here are our learning targets. As you can see, we need to know a ton of stuff. Okay, we're going to start by going on a tour of the old brain. The old brain is the part of the brain that has been around since the beginning of humankind. It holds all the functions of just being alive and being human. You'll notice I do not have a line by line description that goes with each word, or we would be here all day. So listen carefully and just write down the functions in your own words, paying attention to, I don't know, keywords, things that stand out to you. Okay, we're going to start by looking at the bottom of the base of your head into your neck in a section called the brainstem. These three parts are the brainstem, make up the brainstem. The first part is the reticular activating system. This part is in charge of keeping you conscious. And the best way I can explain consciousness is to think about someone who might be in a coma. That person is unconscious. So to be conscious basically means you are alert and awake and aware of the world, okay, the reality of the world. This has to do with some voluntary movement, like eye movement and some basic cognition, but it is most important with your sense of consciousness. The medulla is the next part of the brainstem, and this controls your heartbeat, your breathing, your blood pressure, and your survival reflexes. What I mean by that are things like sneezing, swallowing, vomiting, the things that you would need to, your body will do if there's something dangerous, like if you ingest something or something comes into you and you need to get it out, like you're going to throw up, you're going to sneeze or cough, all of those reflexes that you don't really control, your body just does, that's the medulla. So heartbeat, breathing rate, and survival reflexes. And then the pons is pretty simple. It looks like a little bit of a pillow, and that is because the pons plays an important role in sleep, telling your body when to sleep. Together, these three things make up the brainstem. If any of them were damaged, it would actually threaten your life and it could be fatal. The cerebellum at the base of your skull here is sometimes called the little brain, and it is in charge of, oh, I think I revealed the next one. It is in charge of muscle movement, coordination, balance, and there's one more thing I'm supposed to tell you, some procedural learning. So when you learn how to do something like how to ride a bike, how to tie your shoe, it's probably stored in your cell. That memory is probably stored in your cerebellum. The thalamus is what we call the sensory switchboard. That's a nickname, but what that means is when we sense something, like a sense of touch, a sense of taste, hearing, or vision, it comes from like our eyes, our skin, all these different parts of our body, and then it goes to the thalamus, and then the thalamus will send it to a special part of your brain to process all of those things individually. I'll tell you more where those parts are as we get into this slideshow a little bit further. And these next two parts, the hypothalamus and pituitary gland, are actually on our next slide as well, because they are part of something called the limbic system. The limbic system is nicknamed our emotional control center because these structures that are found in the center of our brain, just above our ears, control motivation, behavior, and memory. They are like a backward C on both sides of our brain, just above our ears. So they all come in pairs. The hypothalamus, in conjunction with the pituitary gland, and the amygdala and the hippocampus all work together as part of the limbic system. The hypothalamus and the pituitary gland together work to maintain homeostasis in our bodies, which means keeps us kind of comfortable and satisfied. Um, and they tell the endocrine system when to release certain hormones to make us respond to our body's natural drives. And our natural drives can be summarized as the 5 F's: fight, flight, Fahrenheit, feed, and fornicate. And those are our desires to be safe in danger, fight or flight, to feed ourselves when we're hungry and our body needs nutrients, to uh, respond if we're hot or cold, to either go get warmer or perhaps cool down if needed. And then fornicate means to find a partner and reproduce. So all of those feelings are natural in our body thanks to the hypothalamus because we need to respond to all of those needs to function as human beings. The amygdala is our emotion powerhouse. This is the part of your brain that controls intense emotions, specifically that of anger and fear. It's one of my favorite brain parts. I'm going to talk about it all the time. And finally, we have the hippocampus. The hippocampus is critical in forming new memories and turning short-term memories into long-term memories. So, of course, it's going to be key to learning because learning is essentially a collection of memories. So, if we were to take out the hippocampus, I'll tell you a story about this in class where this actually happened to someone. You would probably only have a memory that lasted like just 30 seconds to maybe a couple minutes long. And then whatever you just learned would be poof out of your head. So that's our limbic system. Next, we're going to discuss our new brain. So as humans have evolved over hundreds of years, thousands of years, our brain has gotten bigger and more advanced. And that's what makes up the new brain and the cerebrum. The cerebrum are the 2 hemispheres. So here's the human brain down here. And the more wiggles you see inside the brain, the more complex it is. You can see in some animals, they are a little bit less complex. So as I was saying, the cerebrum is made up of 2 hemispheres, and we study it as like 4 different lobes. This is responsible for humans' sophisticated information processing. So the way we are able to think today at a more advanced level compared to our caveman ancestors. There we go. So there's the cerebrum. Within the cerebrum, we have the cerebral cortex, which is the outermost layer of those wrinkles. We sometimes call this the gray matter, and these are the dendrites that will often receive the messages from the other part, from the spinal cord and the other parts of our body. I am going to walk you through those 4 lobes of the brain because we need to know them and we need to know what they do. And again, it will feel like a lot, but don't worry, over time we will figure them all out. We're going to start with the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe controls higher order thinking and executive functioning. So think of it kind of like critical thinking skills, like your most advanced type of cognition. This is where you do your planning, your judgment, your multitasking, your problem solving, your decision making. This is also the part of the brain that controls speech sounds, like your ability to make language. And this is where your personality and temperament is said to be housed or located. Notice we also have kind of a headband across that goes it's the back of the frontal lobe and it goes across the head. This is the somatomotor cortex, also just known as the motor cortex. And this is the area of the brain in charge of moving our body parts, things like our tongue, our lips, our fingers, things like that. You don't need to have all this memorized, but this is just kind of a cool picture to show you that certain areas of our brain specialize in our motor movement. The next lobe is the parietal lobe. So now we're talking about the top, slightly back part of your brain. The parietal lobe controls position, like knowing where your body is. Are you sitting? Are you standing? Things like that. Pain, pressure, and it helps you process information specifically from your senses. So it also contains the sensory cortex. So this little headband area is your somatomotor cortex. This area is like a headband known as the somatosensory cortex, soma meaning body. So it detects your body's senses, your sense of sight and vision and smell and so on, and it helps your body understand what's going on. And so think of the fact like if you're feeling pain, position, pressure, all of those are usually contributed to your processing by your senses. And finally, the occipital lobe. This is the easiest one to learn. Think of it like the eyes in the back of your head because the occipital lobe controls your sense of vision and contains the visual cortex. Nothing else to know about that one. Okay, I would like you to fill these in on the diagram on your page, but I would prefer that you, if you're unsure at all, use pencil so we can tweak it or check it in class. But what you are filling in is the frontal lobe. Then immediately behind it, as part of the same section, is the somatomotor cortex. Then the next box over is the somatosensory cortex, which is part of the parietal lobe. Behind that is the occipital lobe. And then the final label, ignore the stuff on your paper, but the final lobe is the temporal lobe. All together, you can think of the mnemonic device, this is a little silly, called FPOT. Frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal. So it's like you're walking through your head from front to back and then finishing up with the sides. So it's a little mnemonic device to remember all four lobes. So how do we know so much about what brain parts do what when we're thinking, especially because thinking is not something that can actually be like looked at under a microscope? Well, we know so much because of a field called cognitive neuroscience. This is the study of brain activity linked with its mental processes. So, this is an entire field that actually looks at how you could read a brain when it is thinking of certain movements or of an emotion like love or anger, things like that. So, we're going to just be responsible for knowing three different ways to study the brain. The first one is an fMRI. This is a functional magnetic resonance imaging. And you've probably heard of MRIs before. They can be done all over the body for different purposes. But when we're talking about the brain, an fMRI uses magnetic fields and radio waves to produce images that show brain activity while a patient interacts with information. So looking at, this is just a cool graphic, MRI graphic, but let's look above it. When a patient is in an fMRI machine and the patient is instructed to look at pictures of faces, these parts of the brain light up. And when the patient was asked to look at pictures of houses, these parts of the brain light up. Through exercises like this and research like this, scientists have been able to start to map the brain to see what happens where. fMRIs are highly detailed and accurate images of the brain. Next, we have electroencephalograms or EEGs. You perhaps have heard of an EKG that measures heart rate. EEGs put in an EEG machine, electrodes are put on top of a person's scalp, as you can see here on this guy. I don't actually know if they put all of these electrodes all over the face as well. I've never had one done. But electrodes are put on the scalp and they record electrical brain waves. That will detect brain activity and what is going on and how fast the neurons in the brain are firing at any given time. This is especially useful when studying sleep and dreams, and we will talk more about brain waves in that lecture. And then finally, we use brain lesioning to study the brain. Okay, so stay with me here. This is when you deliberately destroy brain tissue to just see what happens, and then you study the resulting behaviors. We do not actually do this on humans on purpose just to see what happens. If we're going to create a brain lesion or destroy a part of the brain on purpose, it's probably for medical reasons like to stop seizures or get rid of something like a tumor. We will do this on animals to see what happens. So if we destroy what part of the brain, what can't that animal or that human do can be just as revealing as some of these other study techniques. Of course, this is not a preferred research method, especially in humans. Okay, I'm going to pause this lecture here. There's going to be a part two, but this first part has all the main parts of the brain and their functions. The next part, I'm going to get more into some unique aspects of the brain and some interesting things that it does. So, part one, functions and basic structures of the brain.